Okay, we're moving on with volume. Today our goal is I can use the formula to find the volume of cones to solve problems. You also need to understand that a cylinder has 3 times the volume of a cone when they have the same base and the same height measures. In other words, the base measures and the height measures, as long as they are the same, when you get a cone, then the cylinder will have 3 times the volume of a cone, and this is what happens, okay? Let's all look at your mathematics chart. Please get it out. All right, so we're looking at our mathematics chart, and remember that we are always going to write a big B when we get a new one up here, because to find our big B, it will always be in the area section of your formula chart, okay? Now, we are dealing with a cone, and a cone is like one of those orange cones or an ice cream cone that is, when you put the ice cream in it, the top part of it, the base is a circle. Well, when you look under your volume, for a cylinder, our formula was big BH. For a pyramid or a cone, and by the way, we will be asked for a pyramid, it's only a cone, okay? It is 1/3 times big BH. So if you notice, it's 1/3 the volume of a cylinder with the same area of the base. It will, and the same height. It will have 1/3 the volume, and that's where that 1/3 in the formula comes from. Okay. So with that being said, we are going to go on to our practice. And our practice, which I had just a second ago, here it is, says volume, the number of cubic inches needed to fill a solid. That's what the definition of a volume is. Cone has one base that is circular and then meets at a common vertex. Okay? So the formula we figured out was V equals 1/3 times big BH. We need to be reminded that big B is what? Big B equals the area of the base. And we cannot forget that, okay? It's not the base, it's the area of the base. All right? So our formula for this is 1/3. Now, what is our big B? Well, our base is still a circle, so you go to the area section of your formula chart, and a circle is still pi r squared. So we've got times, big B is pi r squared, and then we still multiply all of that times the height of our cone, okay? Now, we need to be reminded that diameter, which is all the way across our circle or our base, divided by 2 equals our radius, which is our r in our formula of r squared. Okay? So, example 1. It says we have a cone here, and they want us to find the volume and leave it in terms of pi. And we are going to leave it in terms of pi, and we've got some numbers here. Well, let's identify our numbers first. This is halfway across the circle, so our 12 is our radius. We have a height over here on the side of the cone, and a height in the center of the cone. The thing you need to know is they're going to give you some extra numbers that you don't need sometimes. This height over here is known as slant height. Okay? And you do not use slant height as part of your formula. You need from the center of your base to the vertex of your cone, that is the height you need. So we need to designate 5 as our H. All right, as before, you're going to be required to write 3 steps. I don't care if you know it without it, you're still going to write 3 steps. So here we go. First step, V equals big B. Oh, see, I already did it myself. I already did it myself. 1/3 times big BH. That's the formula for the area of a cone, or the volume of a cone. Then you are going to be required 1/3, and believe me, fractions need to be put in parentheses unless you're using alpha F1, times what's the area of our base. The formula for this one is pi times r squared times our height. So there is the area of our base, and there is for our height of the cone. Then we're going to plug our numbers in. Step 3, 1/3 times pi times, what was our r? Our r was 12 squared times the height of the cone, which is 5. So now it's the easy part. You have a calculator. And this first part said leave in terms of pi. So that means we're going to multiply all the numbers, but not multiply using pi. And I'm going to clear my calculator real quick. And here we go. Parentheses, 1 divided by 3 parentheses times. I'm going to skip pi, and I'm going to do 12 squared times 5. And I'm going to get 240. So 240, and then I'm just going to write pi next to it. Okay? Then it says find the volume to the nearest tenth. So you could do this one of two ways. I'm just going to go back and put the whole thing back in. Most of you would probably just put 240 times pi. I understand why it's less steps, but most of the time you won't be asked to leave it in terms of pi. That is a question sometimes on a test, and that's why we are telling you and showing you over and over and over what it means if you are asked to leave a volume in terms of pi. Okay? So here we go, parentheses, 1 divided by 3 parentheses times second and pi times 12 squared times 5. Okay? And when I do that, I hit enter, and I'm going to write out, because I need to the nearest tenth, I'm going to write approximately 753.98. If you'll look at your calculator, the nearest tenth, we are looking to round it to the nearest tenth, okay? We went over this last week, but this is a tricky one, because we look at our hundredths. Okay, we got to look at our hundredths, and 8 is 5 or more, so it would change the 9, and what are we going to do to the 9? We have to make it a 0. So I'm going to write this down here, and I'm going to put a 0, which then changes this number, because it's 5 or more, to 4. So really, rounding this to the nearest tenth is approximately 754. Okay? All right, let's try another one. So remember I said we're going to identify the height. Well, there it is. It's in the middle. It's going to the top of the vertex. This time we've been given what? A diameter or a radius? I hope you said diameter. So to find radius, remember I said we're going to take our diameter divided by 2 equals our radius. If you do that in your calculator, 6 divided by 2. Ooh, it's not, yes, it's 6 divided by 2. What do you get? 3. That is correct. All righty. So now I'm going to write my formula. So I know that my H is 4 and my R is 3. I'm going to write V equals 1/3 big BH. I've got a cone. Okay? Biggest mistake students make, they leave the 1/3 off. Okay, 1/3 times, what's our big B? What's the area of the base? What is the shape of the base of a cone? Yes, it's a circle. So we go to our area formula for a circle, which is pi times r squared. Then we have to do it times the height of the cone. Now I'm going to plug my numbers in. 1/3 times pi times, what's my radius? 3 squared times What's my height? 4. Okay? Now I'm going to put it in, but remember we're going to leave this one in terms of pi. So I'm not going to use pi in my calculations. And if you guys will build the habit of using this x squared button for squared, you won't stay in what I call expo land, okay? I see students struggle with that, and they get the wrong answer, because when you do 12 to the power of 2, do you see how you stay up in exponent land? Use that to the power up button when you're doing 3, 4, 5, something other than 2, okay? Because then you have to remember to get out before you do anything else. Whereas if I do 12 squared, I'm already ready to do something else, okay? So I'm going to do parentheses, 1 divided by 3 parentheses times 3 squared times 4. Remember, I'm going to write this number down, which is 12, and I'm going to write pi next to it, okay? It's a tiny cone, isn't it? Okay? So then the volume would be 1 divided by 3 parentheses times second and pi times 3 squared times 4, and I would get 37, approximately 37.69. Ooh, another one of those that we're going to have to round to the nearest tenth. It's going to take 2 digits, so that is the 9 changes the score here to a 7, so I know it's going to be 30 something times 7, so that's going to be a 7, and then that is not going to change, because you wouldn't change it unless it was, this was a 9 and it made it a 0, then you'd have to bring your ones over. So it's going to be 37.7 approximately, rounded to the nearest tenth. All right, Bob is building a storage shed in a conical shape. That is another word for a cone, okay? Conical shape. The base of the shed is 4 meters in diameter, so they gave me a diameter, D equals 4, and the height is 3.6 meters, so H is 3.6. What is the volume? Well, remember, you don't need a D, so we're going to take 4 divided by 2, which is going to give us 2. So our R is 2, okay? So now I have my formula, 1/3 big BH. Then I'm going to write it as 1/3 times pi times R squared times H. Then I'm going to plug my numbers in. 1/3 times pi times R squared, which our R was 2, so 2 squared, times our H, which is 3.6. Now, do you see how all these decimals and dots kind of get in the, could get confusing, especially if we had a decimal here? So my suggestion, when we start doing volume and surface area, and it's the only time I suggest it, because I don't ever want you to get mixed up with an X that means times and an X that is a variable, okay? But we don't have an X as a variable in any of our formulas for this. So I would get in the habit of doing little X's instead of dots for your times sign when you're doing volume and surface area, because then you'll never get confused with that decimal, okay? So now I'm going to put it all in my calculator. 1 divided by 3 times second and pi times 2 squared times 3.6, and I end up with 15.07. So this is approximately 15.07, and remember, we can leave it there if they asked us. Now, they didn't tell us to leave it to the nearest tenth or the nearest hundredth, so I'm still going to leave things to the nearest tenth since that's what I've been asked, and I'm going to change that. 7 changes the score, so it's approximately 15.1, okay? And in this case, meters cubed, okay, because it does give us meters. All right, today's practice is pretty simple. It's all just shapes, it's cones. There's a couple of word problems at the end, okay? So you need to get to work. You need to show your 3 steps that I've shown you in your notes. You need to find your approximate value, and it says to the nearest tenth. So if you have problems rounding to the nearest tenth, you better ask your teacher about that, okay? And that's it. Have a great day.